Long ago, in the heart of a lush green valley surrounded by quiet mountains, there ruled a mighty king named Surya. He was known far and wide for his military brilliance and his wealth beyond measure. His palace shimmered in the sun, with golden rooftops and silken banners that fluttered like flames in the wind. But despite all this grandeur, King Surya was not a happy man. Every night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with questions he could not answer. His victories brought only brief satisfaction. His feasts left him feeling hollow, and no matter how much he achieved, something deep inside remained unsettled. One morning, while sitting on the palace balcony overlooking his vast lands, he turned to his most trusted advisor and said, "Why do I feel so empty when I have everything a man could wish for?" The old advisor bowed and replied gently, "Your Majesty, you have conquered kingdoms, but not your own mind." The king fell silent. Later that day, he summoned the wisest monks and scholars in the land, demanding answers. Yet none could satisfy him. Their words were clever, their teachings deep, but they did not quiet the storm within his heart. Then an old wandering monk arrived at the palace gates. He wore robes faded by time and dust, and carried nothing but a wooden staff and a begging bowl. When the guards asked his name, he simply said, "I am a servant of silence." The king heard of the monk's presence and grew curious. "Bring him to me," he ordered. When the monk entered the great hall, he did not bow. He stood with calm eyes, his presence like the stillness of dawn. "I am told you serve silence," said the king. "Tell me, what can silence teach a man like me?" The monk replied, "More than 1,000 voices ever could." Impressed, the king leaned forward. "Then teach me how to find peace." The monk gave a slight nod and said, "To find peace, you must leave your palace." "Leave it?" the king asked. "Yes, come with me. Not as a king, but as a student." After a long pause, the king agreed. He shed his royal garments, dressed in simple clothes, and followed the monk into the forest, leaving behind his guards, his titles, and his crown. They walked for many hours. The monk spoke little, and the king grew irritated. Eventually, they arrived at a secluded pond hidden deep within the forest. The surface of the pond was smooth as glass, reflecting the sky above and the trees around it. The monk sat at the edge and motioned for the king to sit beside him. "This pond," the monk said, "is like the mind." He handed the king a stick and said, "Stir the water." The king did so, creating ripples across the surface. "Now look," said the monk. "What do you see?" "Nothing," the king replied. "The reflection is gone." "Exactly," said the monk. "When the mind is agitated, you cannot see clearly. When it is disturbed by thoughts, desires, anger, and fear, your inner vision becomes clouded." The king looked at the water thoughtfully. The monk continued, "Now, put down the stick. Sit quietly. Watch. Let the water settle." Minutes passed. The king grew impatient. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of leaves. Slowly the ripples faded. The surface of the pond returned to stillness. The king looked again, and there it was, his reflection, clear and whole. "Now," the monk said softly, "do you understand?" The king nodded slowly. "Yes. When the mind is still, truth becomes visible." The monk smiled. "Peace does not come from conquering the world. It comes from learning how to stop stirring the water." "But how do I stop?" asked the king. "I cannot stop thoughts from rising." The monk replied, "No one can. But you can learn to let them pass, without following them." The next morning the king returned to the pond alone. He sat and watched the water again. This time he noticed his thoughts more clearly, the regrets of past battles, the burden of his crown, the fear of losing power. But instead of reacting, he simply watched. The ripples in his mind began to slow. Days turned into weeks. The king visited the pond each morning, and in time he began to change. His heart softened. His speech became measured. His presence, once heavy with command, now carried a quiet strength. Eventually he returned to his palace, not as a man seeking power, but as a man who had discovered peace. His ministers were astonished. His subjects whispered of the change. The once fiery king now ruled with gentleness, wisdom, and compassion. He no longer clung to his desires or feared the future. He had learned the truth that no one had taught him before, that the greatest mirror was not made of silver or glass, but of still water. And when the mind is still, it reflects the world as it truly is, not through the lens of ego or fear, but through the clarity of presence. To this day it is said that deep in that forest the pond remains, still, quiet, watching. And those who sit beside it, with open hearts and silent minds, may just see something more than their reflection. They may see themselves.